what you do. And zone 5 is unmanaged. It's a wilderness zone, foraging, inspiration, meditation. So you can see how closest to your home, that's where you have your food that you're going to eat. So that's that visual. Then we often see this permaculture flower. Now permaculture, I gave recognition to the Shuswap Food Action Society, Buckerfields, and I have to give wonderful credit to the founders of permaculture, David Holmgren and his friend Mollison in Australia.
Bill Mollison, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So this is the permaculture flower. So it's evolved not just on soils and gardens, but it's evolved to land and nature stewardship. For those of us who are here involved in that, it's food forests. For example, the Lighthouse Garden is an excellent example at Salvation Army, also run by the Food Action Society, of nature stewardship and land stewardship. It's going into buildings. For those of us who are engineers and planners, natural disaster resistant construction is at the forefront of building construction today. Tools and technology, we have hand tools and we creatively recycle our old tools. Education and culture, there's a group of people here in Salmon Arm doing very strong advocacy for a Waldorf school. I would like you to get behind that. I'm behind that because we have limited choices in terms of education in Salmon Arm, alternative education, wonderful schools, but limited alternative education. Waldorf education is a great example of alternative education, and there's a moving group here working very hard on that. It includes the arts and music as well. And then, as we all know, we are body, mind and spirit, that's all one. And our indigenous culture is seeing a wonderful revival. Let's all get behind that. In terms of the finance and economic world, for those of you who are involved in that, look for fair trade, look for farmer markets, look for community supported agriculture. All those TEQs and life cycles, they are all permaculture movements. And then of course, land tenure and community governance. We have to have more eco-villages, like for example, Yarrow Eco Village in
Chilliwack.
Chilliwack, yeah. Cooperatives and incubated farms like Halliburton Farm in Victoria. So that's just briefly explaining how permaculture is not just land and farms. We have so understanding all these principles, there are 12 and there are 3 ethics. We're going to look at them. It's a guide. All of this is available to you, by the way. If you request it afterwards of me, give me your email address, I can email it to you, all my presentations, then you don't have to take notes. So it's a guide in design and maintenance of systems that work harmoniously with nature, people, and the world around us. So we all just have to sit when we meditate and look at nature and see how nature works harmoniously. And we can learn so much from that, and that's what permaculture is moving. It's a design manual, if you like. We have the 12 principles, starting with observe and interact, going all the way to edges and valuing of the marginal. In the center, the 3 ethics: care for people, care for the earth, and fair share. That's it, and we will get to each one of them. And I'd like you to also understand what a permaculture guild is. So it's grouping plants, animals, people, social systems together that work particularly well together and benefiting from each other. Now, our permaculture guild that we formed, it's been wonderful to be part of that. We visited each other's farms. You could see the light go on in everybody's eyes when they were at those farms and helping each other with our needs. This farm's need was, for example, to get rid of invasive species. So we all went in there without tools. The end of the day, it was gone. And just that feeling or the light that happens on such occasions, and the benefit of the meals. The last one we went to was Notch Hill, and Jennifer made the most amazing onion soup. And everybody brought something, and it's the best, always the best meals. So it's that community growing, it's cultivating community. So a permaculture guild example in your garden is, for example, your apple tree. Now your apple tree is in the middle. Around it you have vegetables. You have bulbs that inhibit grass. Did you know that? Did you know that grass is inhibited by daffodils, onions, and garlics? The grass doesn't really grow well around those. You have pest repellent herbs, mint, oregano, lavender. They're wonderful repellents for pests. And nitrogen fixers. Our soil needs nitrogen. We can plant clover, gumi, or legumes. Dynamic accumulators are like, for example, plants that you can use as mulches, like comfrey. Plant comfrey under your apple trees. And then you could use that. People always say comfrey is invasive, but use that to chop and drop it around your apple trees and in your vegetable garden. It's a dynamic accumulator. And then you have to have a human attractant around your apple trees. Berries are great for that. Berries are human attractants. And you have to have bee attractants, like bee balm and borage. So that on one page is a guild. Now there's that website, and a group of people were carefully selected by the federal government to start something called Farmers for Climate Change, and they came up with solutions. Now the solutions are briefly these, because everybody came, now the climate's changing, we have to do things differently, what can we do? So this is what this group, after careful study, came up with. They said, we have to improve the credit of organic nitrogen sources. We have to store and handle manure better. We have to use more floating covers. The big floating row covers, or what's the other word for it? That you cover your vegetables with in the winter time or in the early spring. Floating row covers. We have to focus on acidification of liquid manure, livestock management, and increase legumes in pastures to build nitrogen. We have to go to rotational grazing, extended grazing periods, soil management, cover cropping, intercropping, wetland and tree management. This is, cover crop is what you plant in to feed your soil. Intercrop is how you plant in your carrot row. What goes well with carrots? Marigolds. So we intercrop carrots with marigolds because it confuses the carrot rust fly. Marigolds have such a strong scent that the carrot rust fly, if it smells it, it goes somewhere else and leaves your carrots alone, for example. More recommendations, just very shortly. Looking at, you're going to see all these words very much in future. You're going to see these words. Conversion of wetlands. Now Ron and Jennifer know what I'm talking about because they are on a wetland. Focus on restoration of that wetland. Do not avoid conversion of it, and I know that's what they're doing. And also focus on conversion of shelter belts. Do you know what a shelter belt is? That's a line of trees, shrubs planted for wind and erosion protection. So Amelia, on your farm you have a lot of wind. So you need a lot of protection from that wind, so plant trees. And I think you're planting nut trees, are you?
That's right,
Yeah.
nut trees and fruit trees and berry bushes for wind protection.
Great. So shrubs and trees. And alley cropping, this is a great example of alley cropping. So you plant your trees, your crops in between trees or shrubs. And then silvopasture. Silvo is the Latin word for forest. It's a practice of integrating trees, forage, domesticated animals, animal managed grazing. And this is one agroforestry distinct form, silvopasture. Now agroforestry, if you get into that field, has lots of forms. And silvopasture is one of them. And then plant riparian trees. Now I never quite knew what a riparian tree is until with the help of technology. It's a strip of moisture-loving vegetation growing along the edge or along a water body. Now I'm thinking, and I'm sorry they're not here, but we could convey that message to them, Bill and Kate, over in Chase. Mm-hmm. They're on the edge of, is it the Shuswap River? It goes by their farm. They're at the edge of the river. And then on that strip of moisture-loving vegetation, they can grow more trees, riparian trees.
If I can add to that, just to, is we applied for a grant for the water management grant, and it's so that farms locally will start managing their edges better when it comes to waterways, so that we can avoid all of the algae blooms that are now affecting our lake, which is going to really devastate our tourism sector if it continues. And so farms who are utilizing cow manures and anything else that has runoff of all the nitrogen into the lake and water systems, like if they can be focusing on planting the plants that can help stop that runoff, it will help everybody. So it's good information to pass along at some point too.
Yeah, so there's that zone of transition, and edges is one of the principles in permaculture, just so we know how important edges are. In that area where the slope of the river is, it's difficult to determine sometimes where the boundary is there, but you know, that's the water area between the water body and the upland vegetation. Plant riparian trees there. You can never have enough trees. And then,
Elmarie, can you give an example, a couple of examples of riparian trees?
Willow.
Yeah.
Elderberry.
Elderberry as well.
Yeah.
You know, I always like to go for food sources. Elderberries are wonderful. You know, we've seen, there's a lovely local farm called
Elderberry Grove.
Elderberry Grove, and they have increased their production during COVID years because elderberries are so good for our
Immune support.
immune system.
Do they sell nursery trees as well?
Yes. Yeah, and they actually, he gave a presentation here, I hope he comes again, that's a really good one to attend, on elderberries and how they started. And he gave us each a little elderberry twig. And mine mysteriously disappeared this summer. So and then I noticed a ringneck pheasant very active in the area. So I think it might have gone into the ringneck pheasant's nest or something.
Sorry, but what does it mean, avoided, like the first sentence, avoided conversion of wetlands? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, because people, usually if there's a wetland, you know, that happened especially during colonial times. The first thing our first farmers, bless their souls, did was to remove valuable indigenous food like kamass and wetlands. They
Drained them. They drained them to make them
drained
into
the
dry
wetlands.
fields.
Yeah. So in order to plant into it.
So the recommendation is to avoid doing that and then plant line of trees or shrubs or?
Shelter belts. That's the meaning of shelter belts. What is a shelter?
Okay,
A shelter belt is a line of
the
trees.
conversion of this or shelter belts. Okay.
Yeah,
I
that's
see.
just to explain what shelter belts are. Okay, so that is just in a short sentence what the guilds are. Okay.
So if anybody would like to, if you're not already part of our Shuswap Permaculture Guild, you are welcome to join us. There's a Facebook page, and you can add your email address. You can email me. I'm on the Food Action website, projects at Shuswap Food, and we can add your email address. You know, I think maybe a third of everybody in here is actually already part of it. And we update you with any events that we have coming up, and so you just come as you'd like. If there's a topic of conversation, it's more about like seeing each other's what we're doing, so that you can get that sort of hands-on learning and experience right on somebody else's location. And then, you know, ideally, we love the idea that we could actually help each other out. Because sometimes there's big tasks that you just keep putting off, and just when you just have a group come together, so much more can get done.
We've got one coming up, I believe. It could be a visit to a place called Greenhouses in the Snow, maybe.
Yeah, I haven't done that yet.
Well, Melanie's been the glue again behind this. And I think during the winter season, these sessions are really
Yeah, absolutely.
you know, because of limited travel. So I just want to show you what it looks like. So this is the teaching garden, and what didn't work was that where you see the beans, the scarlet runner bean row there with its beautiful orange flowers that attract the hummingbirds. When in that space we had peas, and for some other strange reason the peas wouldn't grow. They just wouldn't grow. So we figured we would put up a trellis and feed the soil. Put some scarlet runner beans in there. They make a wonderful fence in one season, and they are delicious to eat, and they are lovely seeds to save for your seedy Saturdays or your seed exchanges. So that was what it looks like.
It did create a wall.
It created a wall. It was sewn very closely together, so it was a living wall.
What kind of material did you use for the trellis?
We used just used stakes and string.
Not enough.
You got to flop over.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I know, it's so heavy, right?
Yeah, it was incredible.
And then dear Daryl, our volunteer, he fixed it.
Yeah.
So once more, a reminder of our core ethics: Earth, the environment, people, ourselves. It's not just about ourselves and our families. It's the community. It's all of it. It's the world. So fair share. We have to set limits to our consumption, and we have to reduce abundance. Nature shows us how to do that. So there's our people. Some of you recognize yourselves there. Just really last year, this plant over here is borage, beautiful bee plant. That's our earth. We can transform a dead area of earth into something that's alive. So I started 10 rows. You have to have your little plan, draw your plan, and decide how many rows you're gonna have. Draw your plan of your garden. Start, remember, close to your home, what your herbs are gonna look like in zone 1. This would be zone 2, where you produce food for your plate. So I had zone 2 in mind here with 10 rows. And the first thing I had to do, thankfully this plastic that was on there had fed the soil beautifully, because it was alive underneath. I was astounded, but it was. And we saw lots of little salamanders as well, which is a good sign of the environment. And then we built 3 things: in-ground beds and double duck beds. Take a look at a double duck bed. It's very hard in the beginning and it takes time, but it pays off in the long run. And then we had raised beds, and we covered them with straw while we waited for the long season last year. Do you remember how late the season was? It was a very wet spring last year. So we added straw. Whenever there's a lot of rain, add organic matter. And straw is one of your top 10 golden mulches. It's about fair share. We send everything to the second harvest. Our volunteers are very happy. They go home with loads of food, including myself. And I save myself a lot of on my grocery bill in the summer. So that's an example of a little African squash I tried this year. It's called a gem squash, and you steam it. Do you know it? You're shaking yours? Not many people know it. So we put it at the second harvest with signs on how to cook it. steam it for 20 minutes, slice it in half, scoop out the seeds, and you can eat it with butter and sugar and a spoon. That's how I grew up. And it's delicious. It's got a
Delicious.
nutty flavor. Or you can stuff it with anything from turkey to tomatoes and onions. So it's called an African gem squash. And one day I thought, oh, wait, there's some South Africans here in town, especially at the clinics and the hospital. I'm gonna call them and ask if they wanted some. And the answer every time was, are you kidding? Bring them down right away. So they all went to the clinics, not all of it, a lot of it. And then the doctors got to hear about it. It's important to educate. and they are really happy because it's healthy. It contains, I always thought it didn't contain a lot until I saw that it has quite a bit of nutrients, and it's very prolific. And you can take it on a journey, a long journey, a 3-month journey, because it has its own vacuum seal. It's vacuum packed. If you don't touch the stem or have any indentation in it, it's a vacuum pack. And the flesh goes orange. It morphs into a pumpkin in the winter. So
Yeah, it's from like a zucchini to like a typical winter squash.
yeah. So observe. First thing you do, go to your gardens, your people place, sit there with a little drink of some kind, whatever your drink is, and sit there and watch your garden. Start at 8 o'clock. See how the sun moves, especially in the spring solstice, and then again in the middle of the summer, and then again in the fall. See how the sun moves. By observing nature, you can design solutions suited to your situation. So you can notice a wet area, for example. At the farm, there's this slope, and there was a little waterlogged area forming there. So what did we do? We planted waterlogging plants there, and we started building hugel beds with the help of a lot of volunteers. So a hugel bed is we also we'll get to hugel beds. It's the German for hill, so it's basically a little hill, you probably know them. And we'll look at their design in a minute. We also have principle 2, which is to catch and store energy. So what does that look like? Berms and swales. What's the difference between a berm and a swale? Here you have the picture. So the swale is flat, rounded, or sharp. And the berm is the side of it. The berm is the side of it. It can be flat, can be rounded, or sharp. So it's a valley-like intersection of 2 slopes. And it takes advantage of natural slopes to direct water downward as opposed to letting it pool. So you can have your swales and your berms and direct them to where you want them to go. And that way they will drain. They are permaculture storm drains. That's what berms and swales are. And particularly in wetland areas, take a look at your wetland, decide where you want that water to go, maybe into a pond, and then build your berms and swales and let it go right in there. We're at principle number 2. Any questions around that? So we see now 1 was observe, where you simply just sit and pay attention. 2 was to catch and store it. Water is energy, we have to catch it and store it.
Well, especially nowadays too, right? We really have to think about water usage and how we manage and capture it.
Exactly. And then you can also have those rainwater catchment areas next to the roof with water coming down your roof. So your goal is to obtain a yield. You want food, and you want lots of it for your families and your friends and to share. So what we have to focus on valuable results and abundant harvests. So we grow perennials. A raspberry is a perennial. This is a picture of a wonderful golden raspberry. Have you tried those? They're delicious. They're the best. They're not as prolific as the other red ones, but they're delicious. And your elderberries, don't eat them raw. Why not? Why can we not eat an elderberry raw? will die. It's cyanide.
Well, you'd have to eat a lot to die, but
Yeah, I was gonna say, we didn't know that, we got so many from our neighbor the last 2 years and we ate them all raw, and we didn't die, or even feel bad, so I think you have to
You have to eat
quite
a
large
lot.
Quite a
amount
lot.
to die from.
and chew the seeds, I think too.
Yeah, so that contains cyanide, but so you have to steam them and boil them and make this delicious syrup. Oh my gosh, Ron's falling asleep. Are you
Oh.
okay?
It's okay.
Working so hard as a farmer.
It's okay.
So, look at the kale. I mean, even now, the kale at that teaching garden, under the snow and under the frost, it was wonderful.
It's even better.
It's even better now because it gets sweeter in the cold. And then the tomatoes.
Have you had kale last the whole winter here?
Yeah,
Yeah.
they live under the snow, so don't pull them out.
Yeah, because then I've heard you, then they just keep going up if you keep picking from the bottom up or whatever.
Exactly.
I haven't had it, if it's exposed out, I haven't had it live. I think you'd have to have it in a
Burlap
greenhouse.
or
Or
okay.
even then, but it will grow from its roots in the spring.
Oh, it'll okay.
Yeah, it'll
come back up
regrow,
again.
But the
Okay.
leaves on the plant themselves will die in the
Yeah.
in the freeze.
Yeah.
So under the snow, the roots are alive, especially if you mulch it with straw.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it's gonna look really terrible now. It's gonna get black when the frost is here and the snow comes, but it will regrow in the spring.
It's well worth it, leaving it.
Sweeter.
Yeah.
And then you could leave it, and then it can go to seed. And after it's gone to seed, and you've seen the beautiful golden finches come after the seed, you can leave it, then pull it once the seed. You know, or leave a small patch for seed and then pull the rest. That's what I do and plant new ones. You know, so it's not like they keep on going forever. Like they go from a year from one spring to the next spring.
Yeah.
And the tomatoes go beautifully. They ripen inside. So when the weather gets cold, don't worry about you know, that they're gonna die. Pull them, hang them on the fence, or hang them in your storage space areas on the vine, and they turn beautifully into red tomatoes. Especially if you put an apple near them, because an apple gives off a certain gas that makes tomatoes ripen for some of a strange reason. Does anybody know why?
Ethylene.
Yeah, what?
Ethylene.
Ethylene gas. So, principle 4 is we have to apply self-regulation and accept feedback. That's a great one for real life, because we make mistakes. I mean, we all make mistakes. So we have to acknowledge that and correct an imbalance. If there's last year I planted way too many tomatoes, and then the imbalance was this year not to plant so much. So we adjust our garden practices based on the health of our soil and plants. I told you about the peas. They didn't do well there. So we decided to feed them with that beautiful scarlet runner plant, and look how nicely the parsley intercropped underneath there. We didn't want to work too hard, so we put moving paper, ink-free if you can, in the walkways with straw or weeds or seedless grass on top, just so that can quench the weeds. And in between, look how beautiful the carrots grew. Because this doesn't only just stop you from weeding the whole time, but it also feeds the soil underneath it, because the microorganisms in the soil now eat all these beautiful weeds that are dying underneath there. So we have to use and value renewable resources. Principle 5. If you can just remember not to let anything leave your sight, except maybe tomatoes at the end of the season and garlic that has white rot in, or what was the other thing we stashed at the end of the year? Anything that's diseased, that could leave. But you want to put everything else in your compost, which is your most valuable renewable resource. And for example, lots of examples. How about using bamboo for stakes? Grow your own bamboo, and they can be the stakes.
I've been wondering about that. Does it grow in this climate? Bamboo, has anyone successfully grown it?
I've seen it grow really well here in a hedge in Raven. Yeah, it's very invasive, but that's why we grow it to use it. Remember that when you use seedless grass from your lawns, it's a mulch, it's a weed barrier, it's a soil feeder, it's a moisture retainer, and it's protection from cold temperatures, because especially grass gives off heat. And we have to look at that grass so that it's not too thick. If it's too thick, it's gonna smell, because there's no aerobic movement there and no oxygen, and you don't want it to have seeds, because then the grass is gonna grow again. Look at the different value of renewable resources, like barley and
I was thinking about bamboo. There may be other types of sticks or like plants that you can
yeah,
use instead, no? So if it's not bamboo,
yeah. You can use branches, straight branches.
but other type of like bamboo-like, but not exactly the same.
Yeah,
Like, are you saying something that grows as enthusiastically that you can use
Like
for
a stick,
stakes?
like grows like a stick.
mm-hmm.
Do you know?
Maybe? That-
I know, but I don't know the name.
Our
But
neighbor has some, but I think it's more like when they chop it down every year, but it's still like ceiling height this year. But I don't know how.
This is a hugel. This is exactly what it looks like. At the bottom, you have 1 or 2 inch high branches and bushy prunings, like your raspberries. That's where it's gonna go, right at the bottom. Your sunflower stalks at the bottom. The next layer is green prunings, grass clippings, sod, and straw. Next one, thin layer of compost, and then especially in the spring, a cover of soil. So until we wait for the spring, I just use straw on top. Makes it look good. All this is gonna break down half its size. You have a hugel bed as high as this roof. By the spring, it's broken down half its size. And it's beautiful to see, because where did it go? It's right down there in the soil, and the microorganisms have food. And with you putting in beautiful soil at the top in the spring, once the roots hit all of this decomposing, then they have abundant food for the rest of the summer. We don't waste. Use the egg boxes to start your pea seeds. I did that. The only mistake I made, self-regulated after that, was I put the pea seeds in eggshells. That didn't work too well, because they grew until they hit the eggshells, and I thought they might break it, but they didn't. So now I just put them straight into the egg boxes. We can use all paper containers to start our seeds. We don't have to use plastic anymore. And then from principle number 7, blew me away. When you design your garden, design from patterns to details. And take a look at nature. When you go for your walk, pick up that leaf. A leaf has a fractal. Now a fractal, that's an example of a leaf fractal. Look at that design. It starts in the middle and it just keeps on going. The nature of nature is abundance. Look how abundantly it just grows. And you can design your garden on that leaf, following the sun's path before you select your plants. So the sun's path, check, it's called a sunscape. Check which areas gets the most sun. There you're gonna plant your squash and your tomatoes. Which one is shady? There you're gonna plant your kale and your lettuces. And that's how you select your plants, by following the sun's path. We have to integrate rather than segregate in our lives. It's not just in the garden like that. When are we ever gonna learn to do that as a human race? We group plants, trees, animals, insects from collaboration that ensures health, support, and productivity of all. So planting tomatoes, basil, marigolds together deter pests, and synergy like today, thank you very much for being here, comes from cooperation. We plant different plants and people together. For example, the needs and yields at our permaculture gatherings, we sit in a circle And everybody comes up with, my need is really for someone to tell me what to grow in that shady area on my farm. And my yield to you is this beautiful cake I baked for you today. And, or if you ever need anything, any advice on how to plant garlic, that is my specialty. I can give you that. For example, we all have yields. We have our strengths. Think about what your strengths are. You might be a beautiful flower grower. You could say, I could show everybody at the next Permaculture Guild meeting how to put together a flower bouquet. Right now, my need is for someone to tell me where I could get spray-free straw for the winter. That's how it works in action. Our needs and our yields. So when I started the garden, these guys came to the fence all the time. Our neighbor, our wonderful neighbor, whose land it is, this teaching garden belongs to them. They're stewarding the land that this teaching garden is on as well. They have sheep, and so we have to carefully think what we plant along the fence here that the sheep can eat. We don't want to kill our landlord's sheep, or at the best we want to defend something protein rich. This year there were cows, so we planted sunflowers. Man, those sunflower leaves are full of protein for the cattle, and so they loved that. And so did the sheep. So they could eat sunflowers, and we planted those along the fence lines, making sure that there's nothing that might kill them. So that's how integrating.
And they yielded manure.
They yielded manure for us. So let's think of how we could integrate the beautiful story of the little guy in the classroom who's sitting like this. He's the one you're going to integrate by finding out what his strengths are and giving him that special job to make him blossom. Principle 9, don't worry about being slow. You don't have to be super efficient and fast the whole time. Slow is good. Over time it pays off. Easy to maintain, it gives better resilience, gives larger yields. For example, a small pond. You want a big pond. Start small. The pond will grow. A slow growing plant, like that black crim tomato with its beautiful orange flesh. That's so healthy for us. They grow incredibly slowly, but at the end you're gonna have a very special, healthy plant. So make room for slow growing plants that you can reap the benefit from. In addition to in-ground beds, establish raised beds, double dug bed. The double dug bed is extremely hard and slow to start. We did one last year, and this year I just went down like that. It was like icing sugar. So we planted carrots there, and it was really good for the carrots because they went straight down. And they weren't all funny with going out at funny angles. So carrots love double dug beds. And your Google bed system, wait for it to break down. The beginning people are going to say, what is she doing? It's ugly, but it breaks down into beautiful soil. Beautiful soil. And then what happens in April? We get restless. We want to get that garden going. And so we have to sit back a bit, because if you plant those peas too fast, they're gonna rot. What happens over here every year? It's wet, the sun comes out for 2 weeks and everything's what everybody's planting. And then after that, it starts raining for another 3 weeks and this ground's soggy. So let's work with our weather and not be in too much of a hurry in April. Rather use that time to get prepared and with your garden design. Same as integrate, not segregate. We have to use and value diversity in everything. Different crops, biodiversity, have healthier ecosystems, improve soil health. And if you have a lot of crops, That's diversity. It's not just monocropping or a cornfield, just corn. It's a lot of crops. Because if some of them fail, then you have others. Same with people. Let's feed in as many people as we can, because if somebody does get ill or something, then we can all go and give them our food. So with people, we're involving at the garden a variety of people. We have volunteers taking photos, some participating in tours, others come and learn, and others just simply want to see what it looks like there. Others just simply want to hang out there. They use the space for their children, to expose their children to nature, because we've all seen now how important it is for our children to have a nature experience as often as they can. So the schools come there, and that's how we integrate and value diversity. Make room for people. Edges, there's a beautiful example of an edge where you have a meadow and a woodland meet. And that reminds me of Bill and Kate's farm in Chase. So this particular farmer mowed the edge between the forest and the meadow, and that is just simply where they can walk. And then they also planted, welcome, we also can plant phytoremediants there. Did you know that a sunflower is called a phytoremediant? What on earth is that? That is something that draws toxins from the soil. So I'll never forget, in Victoria there was this shell garage, and then they closed it down, and they had to wait, 6 years or something before they could build there, because of the laws that the oil takes to go away or something. So now they can plant sunflowers in these areas, because the sunflowers take the toxins from the soil, and those sunflowers we might use at an edge where they break down by themselves if we know there was really something toxic there. I don't feel good about putting those in my compost or my hugel bed, but I'll certainly put them in another area where they can break down. We use a lot of wood chips at the farm, at the teaching garden, as weed suppressants. We do not put wood chips in our beds itself because they take too long to break down, and sometimes there's cedar, and we don't want cedar because cedar interferes with our crops. So they're good for the walkways. And find out where they come from. Build relationships with your arborists. They're often in the area wood chipping, and they're looking for a place to dump their wood chips. Strike up a relationship with them and ask them to dump their wood chips on your farm. And that is a fantastic resource you can use in your edges. For example, where that farmer mowed there, you could put some wood chips there. In the edges, we can also have shady trees. So you can plant right on this edge over here, for example. If there was something toxic, you're now going to have sunflowers and your wood chips, and then you can plant over here shade-loving plants, because in this case, this is the west, and this is going to be in shade from early afternoon. Yeah, you're going to plant a whole row of kale. They're going to love it. And then chard as well. We can use fences, boundaries of the garden, as trellises for climbers like peas, beans, and squash. Like that fence between us and the sheep, we could build these, we could plant these scarlet runner beans there. They can eat that, and they can eat peas, they can eat beans and squash. Anything that can go up the fence, use your fence as a trellis. And then establish bee-friendly bird baths. Did you know that bees drown? Because they quite often come in to drink, and their little wings get waterlogged, and they sit there and they drown. So ever since I've seen that, it shocked me so much that I know whenever I see water, I just put a little rock there in case there's a bee that's going to come and drink there, so that the bee can climb out. And establish bird bath, bee-friendly bird baths. If you have a bird bath, put a few rocks in there so that your bees can climb out, or sprinkle some leaves in there so they can have a little boat to float in. And the kids love doing that too. You'll be amazed to see what they come up with. Bee-friendly bird baths, salamander cairns or triangles. That's when you build a pyramid with little rocks. And that's where your snakes are going to go, your friendly snakes, like the North American garter snake comes out and eats your snails at night. Salamanders are going to take shelter there, and that is your IPM, or integrated pest management. You want to make sure that these predators that eat insects, that eat your lettuce, for example, that they have habitat. So think habitat for them. Consider hosting people at the edge of society. So as I mentioned, this permaculture thing is not just about edges on our farms or in our gardens. It's also about people on the edge of society. Think of them on a daily basis. How can you host them? How can you integrate them into your growing spaces so that they will become better people and make better choices if they've made bad choices? Where different systems meet, there's unique abundance. Have you ever seen the abundance where forest meets meadow? Have you ever taken a walk on the beach and where the water comes and meets the shore? There's, especially after a storm, there's this beautiful line of abundance, absolute abundance, and that is an edge. So think of edges as places of abundance, functional and aesthetically pleasing. Our last one is creatively use and respond to change. We all go through change on a daily basis. Embrace change. Embrace it. It's good to observe what grows well, what doesn't. If it doesn't grow well, you're just not gonna do it again next year. Decide to work with nature, never against. See change as opportunity, and to transition your garden in the dry season like this last season. It was very challenging. We had to transition to plant crops that that's drought resistant. I think maybe next year and in the years to come of drought resistant crops. What are they? Where can we plant them? And how can we use them? Once more, this little gem squash, and this is how it grows on a vine with beautiful flowers. And they're so prolific. Look how it makes its own shade. I was walking in the gem squash patch, observing, and I'm looking at this umbrella, and I'm thinking, you're kidding me. Look how it's formed its own umbrella in the heat. And resting on the straw, which then keeps the soil from drying out. So let's be creative about this climate change thing and approach it and embrace it. I think the only other thing that people have asked for is mulches and covers. How are we doing for time?
Oh, we're good.
We've got a few.
10 to 3.
Okay, so I'll just focus on what we've done in terms of crops at the teaching garden. Cover crops and mulches, especially now in the winter time. Something you can do this week.
Yeah, we're still working up at the teaching garden right now, continuing to still add some compost and straw and wood chips and cardboard, just everything that we can to continue to cover up the garden.
I love this plant. It has every single part of it can be used. The beautiful flowers for tea, the leaves for mulch. They used it to cover, if you could have a cut, folks called it knit bone. It congeals blood You can use it as a little band-aid. It's a wonderful mulch. Cardboard. Now by healthy I mean not with toxic ink. Now it's difficult to know if that ink's toxic or not. So read the label. A lot of moving boxes, or moving boxes are good, and the paper that, the paper that goes inside it, that's great. And the bicycle shop downtown, thanks to Elizabeth and Joanna for telling us about that. A lot of them have limited print on their boxes. So cardboard's great. It breaks down so quickly, and the snails and slugs love it. Douglas fir dust. Be sure you don't get cedar dust. Cedar is very acidic. You can use cedar for things like azaleas and acidic loving plants, but flowers. But use Douglas fir dust for blueberries, especially blueberries and other berries. And put it around your plant like a donut so it doesn't touch the stem, because if it touches the stem, it's gonna rot. So make sure, move it away from the stem like a donut. Think donut. And that is.
And do you mean like the needles or?
Douglas fir dust is not pine needles. No, it's like the Douglas fir tree, and you get it at places like Pedro's and the other folks that have covers. And blueberries like that. You put compost on a blueberry, it dies. So they like this Douglas fir dust for some other strange reason.
And I thought the blueberries did like acid.
They like acid, yeah.
Yeah, so you can put pine needles too.
I put my coffee grounds.
That's acidic too, yeah. Did that work for you?
Well, this year they weren't great, but I don't know if that was anything to do with the composting. It seemed to be such a tough winter.
On the island we grew a lot of blueberries, and I just take a look at what everybody else's good blueberries look like, and I do the same thing. Yes, and you're right, they do pine needles, but not too much.
Mm-hmm.
And it's Douglas fir dust. Yeah, not compost.
Most compost is quite base, and so for blueberries, they like very acidic to be really healthy and abundant. Most of the time, even with the coffee grounds, because once you put the water through it, it actually takes away a lot of the acid. So that's good. It creates nice loamy soil, but really what you need to do is buy pearled sulfur. It's a product you can buy to like truly acidify the soil.
Yeah. And then, as I mentioned, never throw away your glass clippings. They are a wonderful resource. Seedless. And this is the new lawnmower, by the way, of the future. Get used to it, everybody. It's a good exercise too. Noiseless, carbonless. Hay, seedless hay is wonderful. You could sell it, Eileen, as a mulch as well, especially if it's seedless.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
So you get first cut hay and second cut hay.
Yep.
So it's the second cut
Oh,
one
the second cut.
before it forms the seeds, because you don't want hay to grow in your growing patch. So I usually put the hay on top of the cardboard just to make sure. And shredded leaves. Anybody involved here with a municipality? If you are, Gabriel, in Victoria there's a wonderful example of a leaf compost program that the municipality started. So what they do is they put their leaves through their chipping machines after they go and pick up the yard waste from everybody's gardens. They focus on the leaves, and they have an area where they just dump leaves after it's gone through their big shredding machines. And they then take that and they dump it in the different parks in Victoria. It's called the Saanich Leaf Program, and it's free to the public. You can go there, back up your little car. I used to put a tarp in the back of my car and load these leaves in there, and they are wonderful, wonderful mulches.
They do that with wood chips too, where you can just go help yourself.
Really?
And this was in Victoria, but the area around Royal Roads there.
It's Plymouth.
Yeah.
They did that with wood chips. Wow, that's why not, The thing is, you don't always know what kind of wood chips are in there, but with a leaf, you know. And now, with Saanich having passed the wonderful bylaw of not spraying, which is hopefully what all municipalities could move towards, we know that those leaves have not been sprayed. So there's an example of Eindhoven, I think that's in the Netherlands, the municipality there, and what they've done with their leaves. So leave the leaves. They block up the gutters, so we have to clean them up, but take them somewhere and use them. And healthy newspaper. Remember how we used to eat fish and chips out of newspaper? We almost poisoned ourselves because there's this, I read this in New Delhi. The Food and Safety Standards Association of India found that newspapers widely used as packaging by small hotels vendors is a potential risk to human health. Why? Because of the print, the ink. So newspapers are good, but you have to find out if it's vegetable ink. Find out if it's veg. So since then, India's changed their laws, so they use a lot of vegetable ink now. And thank goodness the Salmon Arm Observer does too.
Yeah, they use, it's soy ink.
Yes. So they are one we could use as well as a base.
And that's a good one to go to because you can go right to their location, and if somebody's there, you just ask and they unlock the gate for you, and you can load up your entire vehicle full of newspaper, and you would actually just use the entire stack as your mulch, and nothing's getting through that. It is cement.
Pine needles. There we have them. Once more, make sure they don't touch the stems too much. For acidic loving plants. Straw is my go-to. It's gold. It's spray-free straw. Organic straw is hard to get. You can grow your own. Grow your own straw with wheat in the spring. So you have your own little area in your growing area where you can harvest your own straw. It's fabulous. You can use the kernels to bake bread. The stalks are what you use as a mulch. And then the last one, wood chips, as we've explained. Look at the difference between the coarse ones and the fine ones. So when your arborist does come, ask him, is there cedar in it? And is it coarse or is it fine? So ask him and then go for the fine ones. Yeah. What about common veg? Everybody see this one? This one you can plant in the fall, leave it over the winter, leave it in the spring, it completely disintegrates. Don't have to pull it. You can put soil on top. Ryegrass is high maintenance. You have to mow it. It's invasive, requires fertilizer sometimes. It has an extensive root system, attracts wireworm. So what I do with rye, we do plant rye, but we just harvest it before it goes to seed in the spring. And we work it into the soil. Or we pull it and put it on top of our cardboard in the walkways in the spring. Everybody knows what a wireworm is? It's a little white worm, looks like a piece of wire, and they've done extensive research on it at the Agassiz Research Center, and it's hard to get rid of. It stays in your soil for 7 years and it decimates your carrots and your potatoes. So we have to be very careful not to plant things that attract wireworm. And then crimson clover is beautiful, but once more with clover, also invasive, so plant it in walkways and make sure it doesn't go into your sidestep into your growing areas. Winter wheat is the best. It looks like that all over the teaching garden right now. It's gonna look like this in the early spring, and then closer to as the weather warms up, it looks like that. So you harvest the kernels for your bread. You clip off the tops with a big old clipper. Toss it in a pillowcase and smash it. Let the children smash it. They love that exercise. And that drops the little kernels from the stalks, and they can put it through sieves, grind it, and make their own bread. And the rest you use for straw. Austrian winter pea, another fantastic cover crop. You plant it now, leave it over the winter, breaks down in the spring. For all those areas where you see weeds, plant these in the fall. So these come up in the fall, because one of the things that floors all of us is the battle with weeds. You know, so weeds are daunting. And in permaculture, we design our lives so that our lives are easier. We're gonna design our lives so we don't work too hard. We're gonna design our lives so we don't have to weed all the time. So we're gonna plant winter bean.
So, sorry, I did plant some, and they're like maybe an inch or something right now. And so, will they survive under the snow and then keep growing in the spring, or what's their cycle?
They will die. They're
Yeah.
gonna die over the winter under the snow.
Okay,
And they might come up again in the spring, depending on your area. But if they don't, they're gonna decompose as
Yeah.
a mulch.
yeah.
And you can just rake them together or leave them, and some people just plant straight into them.
So when do you normally plant these guys?
In the fall or early spring.
Okay.
Yeah, about February, April.
But you would have fed your soil a lot of nitrogen.
Yeah.
And you eat the peas?
If you let them grow.
Yeah, I guess you could, but they're not as delicious as the Oregon snap pea, for example, or sugar pod peas. They are more to feed your soil, and they're a living mulch, so even if they die, you just leave them there. Don't pull them, don't weed them. Leave them there, make a little hole and plant into them, because they're gonna help with the nitrogen there at your roots. And fava beans are wonderful. They're also known as broad beans, but they need to be staked, see, with bamboo stakes, because they flop over in the spring. You can plant them, it's maybe too late now, but we plant them in the fall, and you could plant those beans in the fall, that is true. And then they come up in the spring, and then they look like that, and then the children, the school students just love opening them up. They all say, oh, it's like a little bed. It's like a little duvet. They're sitting in a duvet there. And it's true. And then you dry it. You could eat them with butter and steam them. They're delicious. Or leave them for your seeds to dry like that.
Now at the community garden this year, we didn't use broad beans, but with all of the peas and the runner beans and everything, so it's that chop and drop concept of just taking your shears and just chop, 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 chop into like a big old salad, basically, that you're using then to throw onto your beds or into your compost. And so broad beans gives you so much actual plant matter that you can then use all of that as either a compost amendment or mulch as well.
That's right.
Or let them grow for the food.
Yeah, so those are the mulches. And this little guy, in Victoria, I grew something called a Cape gooseberry. It had this beautiful, it's had its own sheath, and inside it had this orange, beautiful fruit. And I was blown away by the fact that it had its own floating row cover built in, so we could eat it into December. And what happened? This little guy, a Pacific tree frog, appeared, and then another and another, and they're indicators, they're keystone species, indicators of a healthy ecosystem. And that's where we're going to. And I was just observing how it loves sitting in that soft gooseberry leaf as well. It's a very soft little bed for it. So I would like to ask you to ask me your questions. Please feel free to email me through Melanie at Projects to get direct in touch with you with specific questions about your growing areas. We have a few minutes here, I think.